Hey everyone, thanks for being here. If you're new, hit that subscribe button and drop a like if this story gets under your skin. Comment below. Where are you watching from, and what are you doing right now? Late night scroll? Working? Let me know. Here's what you need to know. I trained demon hunters in a place that shouldn't exist. One of my students was half angel. When hell came for him, we learned that some lights burned too bright to survive. This is what happened when the darkness finally answered. Let's begin. The stone beneath my boots was slick with something that wasn't water. I could taste copper in the air, mixed with sulfur and the acrid burn of sanctified oil going up in flames. Somewhere in the eastern wing, someone was screaming. A prayer or a death cry. I couldn't tell anymore. The difference had stopped mattering 3 hours ago when the sky cracked open and bled red across the mountains. My hands shook as I reloaded the sanctified rounds into the chamber, not from fear, from exhaustion, from the weight of knowing I'd led these people here, to this moment, to this ending. The silver bullets clinked against each other with a sound like small bells, and I thought absurdly of the chapel bells that had shattered when the first wave hit. They'd been ringing vespers. Now they were shrapnel embedded in the courtyard stones. "Professor Nathaniel, North Corridor." I turned. Victoria was pressed against the wall, her jacket torn, left arm hanging useless at her side. Blood, definitely blood this time, painted her collar dark, but her right hand still held her blessed blade, and her eyes were clear. That's what I'd trained them for. Clarity when everything else dissolved into nightmare. "How many?" I asked, moving toward her position. 4, maybe 5. They're changing. Her voice cracked on the last word. Changing. That meant the lesser demons were beginning to molt, to transform into something worse. We had minutes at best. I pressed a rosary into her good hand. 37th Psalm. Don't stop. She nodded, lips already moving in the old words. The rosary began to glow faint gold against her palm. Not much, but enough. We moved together down the corridor, our footsteps echoing off stone walls that had stood for 200 years. The academy had been hidden here since 1823, built into the mountain itself by hunters who understood that some wars never end. They just pause, catch their breath, wait for the next generation to pick up the weapons. I'd been teaching here for 15 years, long enough to see faces blur together, long enough to forget most of their names after they graduated and vanished into their missions across the world. But I remembered every single one who died during training. Their names were carved into the memorial wall in the chapel. 17 names in 15 years. Tonight would add more. The corridor opened into what had been our main library. Now it looked like something had vomited darkness across every surface. The books were burning with black flames that gave off no heat, only a creeping cold that made my teeth ache. In the center of the devastation, 4 shapes moved with the jerking, broken puppet movements of beings that didn't quite fit inside physical reality. They'd been human once, maybe a month ago, maybe a century. It didn't matter. They weren't human anymore. "Fiat Lux," I whispered, and pulled the trigger. The first demon's head snapped back as the blessed silver punched through its skull. It didn't die. You can't kill what's already dead, but it staggered. The round's sanctification disrupted the possession long enough for the stolen body to remember it was a corpse. The thing inside screamed with rage and pain as its vessel began to decay and fast forward, flesh sloughing off bone in wet chunks. Victoria was beside me, chanting in Latin, her blade cutting sigils in the air that lingered like burning after-images. The demons hissed and recoiled. Holy symbols only worked if you believed. If you had faith not just in God, but in your own right to wield his power against the darkness. Victoria believed. Even with her arm shattered and her voice hoarse from screaming prayers, she believed. The second demon lunged, I ducked, felt claws whistle past my ear, and fired twice more into its center mass. The impact drove it backward into one of its companions. They tangled together, snarling and snapping at each other as much as at us. Demons don't have loyalty. They have hunger. "Back!" Victoria shouted. I retreated with her toward the doorway as she finished her incantation. The sigils she'd drawn pulsed once, twice, then detonated in a blast of white light that scoured the room. The demons shrieked, a sound that wasn't sound, that bypassed ears and stabbed directly into the brain. I tasted blood where I'd bitten my tongue. But when the light faded, the demons were burning. Actually burning this time, with clean fire that consumed and purified. We didn't wait to watch them dissolve. We ran. "The sanctum?" Victoria gasped as we sprinted back through twisting passages. Compromised. I'd seen the bodies outside its doors. Good people, my students. Their faces frozen in expressions that would haunt me until my own death. We're falling back to the chapel crypts. Father Dominic is sealing the civilians there. What about... She stopped. Didn't need to finish the question. He's holding the eastern approach, I said. Alone. Victoria's expression flickered. Fear. Awe. Something else I couldn't name. Everyone looked at Elior that way. Like he was either salvation or damnation, depending on which way the light hit him. We found the others in what remained of the armory. 6 students out of 12. Father Dominic, the academy's chaplain, his white collar stained with soot and worse things. And Thomas, our quartermaster, who'd lost his left hand to a demon's bite and cauterized the stump himself with a blessed iron poker. He was still conscious, still loading weapons. "Status," I said. "Eastern wing is lost," Father Dominic reported. His voice was steady, but his eyes weren't. "Western is holding, barely. Nicholas died sealing the north tower. Took 17 demons with him." Nicholas, 23 years old, fastest runner I'd ever trained. He'd wanted to be a track athlete before he discovered he could see demons wearing human faces. I'd taught him how to turn that sight into a weapon. Now, he was ash and memory. "The civilians?" I asked. "Safe in the crypts, for now." Father Dominic pulled out his flask, took a long drink of holy water. It was supposed to be used for blessing weapons, but we were all past caring about protocol. "The seals are holding, but if Asmodriel himself breaks through, he won't." The voice came from the doorway, and everyone turned. Elior stood there, and even after 3 years of training him, I still felt that moment of vertigo when I looked at him directly. He was 24 years old, tall and lean, with black hair that fell into eyes that were too blue, the blue of sky at altitude, of glacial ice, of things that belonged to realms above human habitation. His father had been a maintenance worker in Denver. His mother had been something else. Blood covered his jacket. Not his own. The sword in his hand, the one he'd forged himself in a week-long vigil that none of us had been allowed to witness, was clean. It was always clean. The blade was inscribed with words in a language I couldn't read, symbols that hurt to look at directly, that left after images in colors that didn't exist. "East approach is clear," he said, as if he'd just finished a training exercise. I counted 47. They're regrouping for another push. We have maybe 10 minutes. 47. Alone. In less than an hour. Thomas whistled low. "Jesus Christ." "Not quite," Elior said with the ghost of a smile. There was no humor in it. There never was. But close enough for government work. "You're bleeding," Victoria said. Elior glanced down at the gash across his ribs, visible through his torn shirt. It was already closing, flesh knitting together with visible wisps of golden light. "It's nothing. They're getting desperate, sloppier." "Or they're testing you," I said. "Measuring what it takes to bring you down." His blue eyes met mine. For just a moment I saw past the calm exterior to something ancient and tired. Something that had never asked to be born into this war. "Let them measure," he said quietly. "When Asmodriel comes, I'll be ready." "You can't face him alone," Father Dominic said. "He's a general of the pit, one of the fallen who walked beside Lucifer. The texts say..." "I've read the texts." Elior's voice was soft, but it cut through the chaplain's words like his blade through demon flesh. "I know what he is. I know what I am. That's why this is happening. That's why he's here." The room went silent, except for the distant sounds of destruction. Somewhere above us, stone was grinding against stone. The mountain itself was protesting what was happening within its bones. "The Nephilim," Thomas said. His voice was slurred from blood loss and pain, but his mind was sharp. "You said there'd been others. Other attacks on religious orders. They were hunting me." Elior looked at each of us in turn. "Not just me. My kind. There aren't many left. Maybe a dozen in the whole world. Most stay hidden. Live quiet lives. Pretend to be human." He touched the sword's hilt. "I couldn't do that." "Because of what your mother told you," I said. He nodded slowly. "Before she left, she gave me a message. Said there would come a day when the balance would tip, when demons would grow bold enough to assault heaven's gates again. She said I was born for that day, that all Nephilim were born to be the bridge between realms, to fight in the spaces where angels can't touch and humans can't survive." "Inspiring pep talk from Mom," Victoria muttered, then winced as the movement jarred her broken arm. "She wasn't trying to inspire me," Elior said. "She was warning me. Because if we're the bridge, we're also the biggest threat to the pit. A demon can't possess us, can't corrupt us. We're poison to them, and they know it. So they hunt us. And Asmadriel—" He paused, jaw tightening. "Asmadriel personally led the campaign that killed the last Nephilim army, 3,000 years ago, in the shadow of Babylon. The weight of that history settled over us like a burial shroud. 3,000 years. How do you fight something that's been killing your kind since before recorded history?" "So, what's the plan?" Thomas asked. "Always practical. I'd miss him if he died tonight." When he died. We were all on borrowed time now. "You get the civilians out through the mountain passages," Elior said. "Take them down into the valley, to the monastery at Bridgeport. They'll be safe there. Father Dominic knows the way." "And you?" I asked, though I already knew the answer. "I do what I was born to do." He looked at me, and for just a moment, he was the frightened 18-year-old who'd shown up at our gates 3 years ago. The boy who discovered his mother's true nature when a demon tried to murder his family and he killed it with his bare hands. The boy I'd promised to teach how to survive in a world that would never accept him. "Professor," he said quietly, "thank you. For everything. For not turning me away when the cardinals demanded it. For teaching me that having divinity in my blood doesn't make me divine. It just makes me responsible." I wanted to argue. Wanted to tell him there was another way. But I'd been fighting demons for 30 years. I knew when you were out of options. "Your mother would be proud," I said. "My mother was an angel of the 5th choir," Elior replied. "Pride is a sin, but maybe—" He smiled then, genuine and sad and achingly young. "Maybe she'd approve." The building shook. Somewhere above, glass shattered. Screaming started again, closer this time. The 10 minutes were up. "Move," I ordered. "Victoria, help Thomas. Father Dominic, get them to the crypts and start the evacuation. I'm staying with Elior." "Professor," Victoria started. "That's an order." I loaded fresh rounds, checked my knife, adjusted my rosary. Someone needs to witness. Someone needs to remember. Elior looked like he might argue, then nodded. "Stay behind me. When it starts, don't interfere, no matter what you see." They left quickly, Victor A. and Thomas supporting each other, Father Dominic shepherding them with whispered prayers. I was alone with my student, my Nephilim, my impossible responsibility, in an armory that smelled of gun oil and incense and the copper tang of spilled blood. "Did you know?" I asked. "When you came here, did you know it would end like this?" "No," Elior said. He was checking his blade, running his thumb along the edge. It drew blood instantly, and the blood vanished into the metal like water, into sand. The sword pulsed with light. "But I knew it would end eventually. Everything does. I just hoped I'd be ready, Are you? He looked at me with those impossible blue eyes. Ask me when it's over. The ceiling exploded. Stone and timber crashed down around us. I threw myself behind a weapons rack as chunks of ceiling the size of refrigerators slammed into the floor where I'd been standing. Dust filled the air, choking and blinding. I couldn't see Elia. Couldn't see anything except gray chaos and the red emergency lights flickering through the haze. Then the dust began to move, not settling, moving, swirling in patterns that hurt to follow, spiraling inward toward something descending through the hole in the ceiling. The thing that had made the hole. It touched down without sound. No impact, no weight. Just suddenly present, as if reality had edited itself to include this new horror. The dust cleared around it in a perfect circle, and I got my first clear look at what we were actually fighting. I'd expected a monster. Claws and fangs and the twisted mockery of flesh that demons usually wore. But Asmodriel was beautiful. He stood 7 feet tall, wrapped in armor that looked like it had been forged from starlight and then corrupted. The silver turned to tarnished bronze, the holy symbols inverted and bleeding. His face was perfect, sharp cheekbones, full lips, eyes like molten gold. Wings spread behind him, but they were wrong. Feathers that looked like they'd been dipped in oil, iridescent and sick, trailing wisps of smoke that smelled like burning churches. Nephilim, he said, and his voice was music. Terrible, perfect music that made my bones ache with harmonics that didn't belong in this dimension. I have crossed centuries to find you. Do you know how long I've waited? Elior stood between us, sword raised. He looked small compared to the fallen general. Human, fragile. But the blade in his hands burned with light that made Asmodriel's shadows recoil. Long enough to forget what you were, Elior said. His voice was steady. Long enough to become what you feared. Asmodriel laughed. It sounded like glass breaking underwater. Fear? Child, I am fear. I am the nightmare that makes angels weep. I am the reason your mother fled back to heaven and left you here to rot among the mortals. He gestured at me without looking. Among the broken and the damned. Don't listen to him, I said, forcing words past a throat that wanted to close. Every instinct screamed at me to run. The presence of this thing was wrong on a fundamental level, like standing next to a black hole or watching the sun die. Oh, the teacher speaks. Asmodriel's golden eyes found me. The weight of that gaze nearly drove me to my knees. Nathaniel Cross. 30 years hunting my kind. 63 confirmed kills. You were quite the thorn. Were. He smiled, showing teeth too white and too many. Did you really think you could hide him here? That I wouldn't feel the light burning in this mountain like a beacon? You're here for me, Elior said. Let them go. The humans, they're not part of this. Everything is part of this. Asmodriel moved, and it was like watching film skip frames. One moment at the far end of the armory, the next close enough to touch. Elior's blade came up, and white fire exploded between them. The shockwave threw me backward into the wall hard enough to crack ribs. Through watering eyes, I watched them fight. It wasn't like the movies. There was no elegant choreography, no dramatic pauses. It was brutal and fast and absolutely terrifying. Elior moved like lightning, his blade a blur of silver light, each strike carrying enough force to shatter stone. But Asmodriel was faster. The demon general dodged and parried with contemptuous ease, his corrupted wings creating gusts that sent weapons flying, that made the air itself scream. Your mother taught you well, Asmodriel said conversationally, ducking under a strike that would have decapitated him. But she taught you angel craft. Heaven's way, all defense and righteousness and restraint. He caught Elior's blade between 2 fingers. The metal shrieked. We who fell learned a better way. We learned hunger. He headbutted Elior hard enough to crack the stone floor when the Nephilim hit it. Blood, red mixed with gold, splattered across my boots. Elior rolled, gasping, and Asmodriel was on him, one clawed hand wrapped around his throat, lifting him off the ground. "You're strong for a half-breed," the demon general said. "Your mother must have truly loved your father to stoop so low, to soil herself with mortal flesh." He tilted his head, studying Elior like a specimen. "Did she ever tell you why she left? Why she abandoned you when you were 9 years old?" Elior's hand was locked around Asmodriel's wrist, trying to pry himself free. His face was turning purple, but his eyes, those impossible blue eyes, never wavered. "She left," he choked out, "because staying would have marked me, would have drawn you sooner. She left to give me time to grow strong enough to face you." "Noble," Asmodriel purred. "Stupid, but noble. Except there's a flaw in that plan, Little Light." He leaned closer, wings spreading wide to block out the emergency lights, plunging us into shadow. "Angels can't lie, but they can be mistaken. She left because the host commanded it, because Nephilim are abominations, because you're a reminder that heaven itself can sin." He threw Elior across the room. The impact with the far wall left a crater in the stone. My student crumpled, coughing blood. "No," I heard myself say. Found myself on my feet, gun in hand, though I didn't remember drawing it. "That's not true." Asmodriel looked at me again. This time, there was something like pity in those golden eyes. "Isn't it? Ask yourself, teacher, if heaven wanted the Nephilim to exist, why are there so few? Why do angels never speak of them? Why did I slaughter thousands of them in Babylon and no divine army came to stop me?" He spread his arms. "Because we fell, but they abandoned. At least we're honest about our sins." I pulled the trigger. All 6 rounds, blessed silver, straight into his chest. The impact staggered him, each round flaring with holy light as it punched through corrupted armor. For a moment, I thought it had worked. Then he looked down at the wounds, smoking and burning, and laughed. "Adorable." He gestured, and my gun melted. Just liquefied in my hand, metal running between my fingers like water, scorching my palm. I screamed, couldn't help it, clutching my burned hand to my chest. Elior was back up, moving despite the blood coating his face, despite the way his left arm hung at a wrong angle. He slammed into Asmodriel from behind, his blade finding a gap in the armor, driving deep into the demon's back. Light erupted from the wound, pure and searing, and Asmodriel actually screamed. The sound shattered every window in the armory. I felt my eardrums rupture, felt blood trickling hot down my neck. But through the ringing silence, I heard Elior's voice. "My mother left because she loved me. You fell because you love nothing but yourselves. That's the difference between us." He twisted the blade. Asmodriel convulsed, wings flailing, his beautiful face contorting into something bestial and furious. Then he simply vanished, leaving Elior stumbling forward, blade striking empty air. "Behind you!" I tried to shout, but it came out as a whisper through my damaged ears. Asmodriel materialized behind Elior and backhanded him with enough force to send him spinning through the doorway into the corridor beyond. The demon general followed, and I followed them because what else could I do? What else was I for, if not to witness, to remember? The corridor was wrong. The walls were bleeding now, actual blood seeping from cracks in the stone. The emergency lights flickered and died, plunging us into darkness broken only by the glow of Elior's blade and the sick luminescence of Asmodriel's corrupted form. They clashed again in that darkness. I saw it in flashes, in strobing moments of impact and separation. Saw Elior take a claw across the ribs that laid him open to the bone. Saw him retaliate with a strike that took one of Asmodriel's wings at the joint, the severed appendage dissolving into smoke and ash. The demon general was faster, stronger, but Elior fought with desperate precision, every strike calculated, every movement purposeful. "You're tiring," Asmodriel observed. He wasn't even breathing hard. "The flesh weakens. The human half of you fails. If your mother had bred with a fallen instead of a mortal, you might have stood a chance." If my mother had bred with fallen, Elior gasped, dodging a strike that carved a trench in the wall behind him. I'd be you. I'd rather die human than live as a monster. Then die. Asmodriel's hand shot forward, fingers elongating into claws that punched through Elior's chest. I watched my student's eyes go wide with shock and pain. Watched golden blood pour over the demon's hand. Watched Asmodriel smile. There, the general whispered. Feel that? That's your divinity leaking out. Your light fading. In a moment, you'll just be meat and memory. And I'll move on to the next Nephilim. And the next, until the bridge between realms is burned and broken. Elior's hand came up slowly, closed over Asmodriel's wrist, and then he smiled through blood-stained teeth. Who said I was trying to win? The corridor exploded with light. Not the clean white light of heaven, not the golden radiance of angels. This was something else, something primal and raw, the light of creation itself, of the moment when existence tore itself from nothing. Elior was burning from within, his flesh incandescent, his bones visible as shadows in the glare. Asmodriel tried to pull back, but Elior held him fast. You wanted the Nephilim gone? Elior's voice echoed, layered with harmonics that made my teeth vibrate. Because we're bridges? Because we connect realms? He laughed, bitter and blazing. Then let me show you what a bridge can do. The world inverted. I can't describe it better than that. One moment I was in a corridor in a mountain academy. The next, I was looking at that same corridor from outside reality, as if I'd stepped through a window into somewhere else. And in that elsewhere, I could see the threads, the connections, the pathways between heaven and earth and the pit. They wove through everything like veins through flesh, pulsing with power and potential. Elior had grabbed hold of those threads, was pulling them tight around himself and Asmodriel, weaving them into a prison. A seal. I understood then what he meant to do. Not kill the demon. You can't kill a fallen angel, but trap him, bind him to a space between spaces where he couldn't touch any realm. No, Asmodriel snarled. The beautiful mask was gone. His face stretched and warped, showing the truth underneath, something primordial and hateful, something that had rebelled against creation itself out of spite and pride. You can't. The power required. You'll destroy yourself. I know, Elior said simply. The threads tightened. Reality screamed. I felt myself being pushed back, ejected from that between space, slammed back into normal existence. The last thing I saw was Elior's face, serene and sad, as the light consumed him and Asmodriel both. Then I was alone in a corridor filled with silence and ash. My ears were ringing, my hand was scorched, my ribs were broken. I stood there swaying, staring at the spot where they'd been. The floor was smooth there now, fused into glass by the heat. In the center was Elior's sword, driven point first into the stone, still glowing faint gold. I reached for it, but stopped. It was too hot to touch, too sacred. It would stay there, I realized. A marker, a gravestone for a war no one would ever know was fought. Behind me, footsteps. I turned, raising my knife with my good hand, ready for another fight. But it was Victoria and Father Dominic, leading a group of civilians. Scared, crying, alive. Professor, Victoria breathed. What happened? Where's... He won, I said. My voice sounded hollow in my damaged ears. He won, and it cost him everything. Father Dominic approached the sword, slowly, reverently, knelt before it. May he find peace, the chaplain whispered. May his sacrifice be remembered. We evacuated through the mountain passages as planned. 23 civilians, 6 students, 2 teachers, out of a population of 45. We emerged into dawn light, into a world that had no idea it had almost ended during the night. The monastery at Bridgeport took us in. They asked no questions. They never did. I spent 3 weeks in their infirmary. My hand healed poorly. leaving burn scars that would never fade. My hearing returned mostly, though I still heard ringing in quiet moments. The ribs mended. The rest, the weight of memory, the faces of the dead, the last look on Elior's face as he burned. Those wounds were permanent. When I was strong enough, I went back. The academy was abandoned, officially condemned due to structural instability. I walked through the ruins alone, past scorch marks and bloodstains, until I reached the corridor. The sword was still there, though the glow had faded to barely a flicker. I touched it, just the pommel, the only part cool enough to handle, and I felt something, a pulse, a heartbeat, as if somewhere beyond the walls of reality, the light was still burning. Professor Nathaniel. I spun. The voice had come from everywhere and nowhere. It sounded like Elior, but layered with echoes, with harmonics that made my bones vibrate. "Elia?" I whispered. No response. Just the wind through broken windows. Just my imagination, surely. Just trauma and grief playing tricks. But as I left, as I walked away from that place for the last time, I could have sworn I felt eyes on my back. Watching. Waiting. The monastery gave me shelter for a year while I recovered. While I decided what came next. The cardinals wanted to shut down the academy permanently, to scatter the surviving students to other orders. I fought them. Argued that we needed the training now more than ever. That Asmodriel wasn't the last general of the pit. That more would come. In the end, they let me reopen. A new location, deeper in the mountains, with better protections. But smaller. Always smaller. Because fear makes people cautious, and caution kills ambition. I trained the survivors. Victoria, who'd lost her arm but not her faith. Thomas, who learned to fight one-handed better than most could with two. 3 others whose names I carry like prayers. James, Dakota, Rebecca. I made them stronger, faster, more ruthless. I taught them everything Elior had learned, everything he'd shown me in those final moments. And I waited. Because deep down, in the place where faith lives or dies, I believed the pulse I'd felt in that sword meant something. That somehow, impossibly, the bridge between realms hadn't been completely destroyed. That Elior was somewhere in the spaces between, still fighting, still burning, still refusing to let the darkness win. 2 years passed. Then 3. The new academy grew slowly. We took in recruits carefully, trained them thoroughly. I personally vetted every single one. No more surprises, no more secrets. Just discipline and faith, and the knowledge that we stood between humanity and the abyss. But late at night, during evening prayers, when the candles burned low and the mountain wind howled through the chapel, I would sometimes hear it. A whisper in a voice I knew. A presence that felt like warmth and light and impossible hope. "Professor, the light still lives." And I would touch the new scars on my hand, and I would believe. 5 years after the siege, I stood in the new chapel during midnight vigil when reality fractured. It started small, a candle flame burning the wrong color, not orange or yellow, but blue-white like starlight. Then another, then all of them, the entire chapel illuminated by impossible fire that cast no shadows. The temperature dropped so fast I could see my breath, see ice crystals forming on the wooden pews. Victoria was beside me instantly, blade drawn. We'd all learned to sleep light, to wake ready. "What is this?" she asked. Her prosthetic arm, a gift from a sympathetic engineer who'd lost family to demons, whirred softly as she adjusted her grip. "I don't know," I said, but that was a lie. I knew. Deep in my chest, where that first pulse from Elior's sword had resonated years ago, I knew. The air split open. Not like before, not with violence and destruction. This was surgical, precise, a seam in the fabric of existence opening like a surgical incision. Through it poured light, clean and pure. and the smell of ozone and something else. Sanctified air. The atmosphere of somewhere holier than Earth had any right to be. A figure stepped through. For a heartbeat, I thought it was Elior, and hope surged so violently in my chest it physically hurt. But no, this person was shorter, wrapped in robes that seemed woven from moonlight, face obscured by a hood that shadows clung to despite the blazing candles. Nathaniel Cross. The voice was neither male nor female, neither young nor old, just eternal. The Nephilim's teacher. I swallowed hard, forced my voice steady. Who are you? I am Shamael, watcher of the threshold. The figure moved closer, and I saw what looked like eyes beneath the hood. Not eyes like humans have, but orbs of shifting light that contained entire galaxies. I come bearing message and burden. Victoria had moved to flank the stranger, but I raised my hand. Stand down. To Shamael. What message? The angel, because what else could it be, reached into its robes and withdrew something. At first it looked like light itself, formless and flowing. Then it solidified into a crystal vial, inside which something gold and molten swirled like captured sunrise. 5 years ago, your student created a prison between realms, Shamael said. A cage for Asmodriel, woven from his own essence. Half human, half divine, he used his nature as mortar to seal the gaps between heaven, earth, and the pit. It was unprecedented, brilliant, suicidal. Is he alive? The question burst out before I could stop it. Is Elior alive? Shamael tilted its head. Define alive. His body dissolved in the binding. His blood became the walls of the prison. His bones became the bars. But his consciousness, his soul. The angel held up the vial. This fragment is all that could be recovered. A shard of awareness, locked in the moment of his sacrifice. He exists in eternal pause, neither living nor dead, aware but unable to act. I stared at the vial, at the swirling gold that I now recognized as Elior's blood, the divine half of him, trapped and isolated. That's torture. That's duty, Shamael corrected, not unkindly. He understood the price, but there is complication. The angel's voice carried a note of something almost like concern. The prison holds. Asmodriel cannot escape, but he can still speak, still whisper. And over 5 years, his whispers have reached others of his kind. 13 demon generals now know where the prison is, where the weak points are. They gather, planning to shatter it from outside. Victoria swore softly. If they break him out, they won't just free Asmodriel, I finished. They'll destroy the prison entirely, kill what's left of Elior, and open a permanent gap between realms. Precisely. Shamael extended the vial toward me. Which is why we offer a choice. This essence can be used 2 ways. First, it can be consumed. The one who drinks will gain a fraction of Elior's power. The ability to sense demons across vast distances, to wound them with blessed weapons more effectively, to survive injuries that would kill normal humans. You could create a champion, a weapon. I heard Victoria's sharp intake of breath. The tactical advantage of such power would be immense. But Shamael wasn't finished. Or second, it can be used as a compass. The essence knows itself, knows where the rest of Elior exists. It will guide you to the prison's location in the spaces between realms. There, with the right rituals and sufficient sacrifice, you could potentially free him, restore his consciousness, give him choice again. But if we go there, I said slowly, working through the implications, we'll be exposed, vulnerable. And if those 13 generals are gathering, you'll likely walk into a war, Shamael confirmed. A war you cannot win. The forces arrayed against that prison would overwhelm your entire order 10 times over. Going there means almost certain death. I looked at the vial. at the swirling gold that was all that remained of the best student I'd ever taught. The young man who'd sacrificed everything to save a world that had never accepted him. And I thought about the easy path. Drink it, gain power, build a weapon. The pragmatic choice. The survivor's choice. Professor. Victoria's voice was quiet. Whatever you decide, I'm with you. I turned. She stood straight despite her prosthetic, despite the scars that covered half her face from a demon's fire 3 years back. Behind her, others had gathered, woken by the disturbance. Thomas with his missing hand. James, Rebecca, Dakota. The survivors of that first siege, all grown into hunters of frightening skill. And behind them, the new students. 20 faces, young and old, watching me make a choice that would define all of us. If we use this as a compass, I said carefully, most of us will die. Maybe all of us. The mission is essentially impossible. We'd be throwing away lives, resources, years of training for a chance, just a chance, to rescue someone who might not even want to be rescued. But it's Elior, Thomas said. His voice was rough with scar tissue around his throat. A gift from the demon that had taken his hand. He died for us. Doesn't matter if the mission's impossible. Some debts you pay no matter what. He's trapped because of what we do, Rebecca added. She was the youngest, barely 20, but her eyes held the weight of someone much older. We hunt demons. That's why they came. If we don't try to save him, we're saying his sacrifice was just acceptable collateral. I looked back at Shamael. If we go, if we find the prison, can he actually be freed, or are we chasing false hope? The angel was silent for a long moment. I am watcher of the threshold. I see all possibilities, in 1,000 probable futures. You attempt the rescue. In 997, you die before reaching the prison. In 2, you reach it, but fail to break the seal. In 1, Shamael's voice softened, almost became human. In 1, you succeed. The Nephilim walks free. The prison holds without him, temporarily, and you die anyway as the generals descend. But he lives, I said. He lives. I closed my hand around the vial. It was warm, pulsing against my palm like a heartbeat, like the pulse I'd felt from his sword all those years ago. Then we go. Victoria smiled, fierce and proud. Thomas nodded. The others began moving immediately. No debate, no hesitation. Because that's what I'd trained them for. Not to take the safe path. Not to choose survival over righteousness. But to stand in the gap, no matter the cost. Shamael watched them go, then turned back to me. You understand this is likely futile. That I give you this chance not because heaven expects success, but because we owe the Nephilim at least the attempt. I understand that you're here instead of one of the higher choirs, I replied. That this is unofficial. That if we succeed or fail, heaven will disavow any knowledge. That we're expendable. I met those galaxy eyes directly. I also understand that Elior deserves better than to spend eternity as a prison wall. So yes, we go. The angel reached out and touched my forehead with one finger. Knowledge flooded in, coordinates, not in space but in concept. The way to walk between realms, the path to where Elior waited. It felt like having ice water poured directly into my brain, and I gasped, staggering. The generals will arrive in 3 days, Shamael said. You have until then to reach the prison and complete the ritual. Any longer, and they'll breach it with or without your interference. The angel turned toward the tear in reality. May you find what you seek, Nathaniel Cross. May the sacrifice be worth the price. Then Shamael was gone, and the tear sealed, and I was alone in a chapel that smelled like ozone and burning possibilities. We left at dawn, 32 people total, every able-bodied hunter in the new academy, plus Father Dominic, who refused to be left behind despite his 70 years. We packed light, blessed weapons, medical supplies, enough rations for a week, though we'd only need 3 days, probably less. The journey wasn't through normal space. Using the knowledge Shamael had given me, I opened a pathway, not as clean as the angels, but functional. It looked like a wound in the air, raw and bleeding shadows. One by one, my hunters stepped through. I went last, feeling the terrible wrongness of moving sideways through reality. We emerged into the between space. It looked like the world through frosted glass. Shapes existed here, geometric forms that might have been buildings or mountains or something else entirely. The sky was every color and no color, shifting moment to moment. There was no ground exactly, but we could walk, our feet finding purchase on nothing. And in the distance, maybe a mile away, maybe 10, distance worked strangely here. I saw it. The prison. It looked like a cathedral made of light and scar tissue. Elior's essence, stretched and woven and transformed into architecture. I could see his blood in the walls, golden and flowing like trapped rivers. Could see patterns that might have been his bones, bleached white and reformatted into structural supports. And at the center, a darkness so complete it hurt to look at. Asmodriel, contained but aware, radiating hatred like heat. "Sweet, merciful God," Father Dominic whispered. "No God here," Victoria said. "Just us." We moved forward. The vial in my pocket pulsed faster as we got closer, resonating with its source. But we weren't alone. I felt them before I saw them. Presences in the peripheral, watching, waiting. The generals. They hadn't expected us to come, but now that we were here, they were curious. Amused, even. "Professor!" James called out. He was pointing to our left, where figures were beginning to materialize. Demons. Dozens of them. Maybe hundreds. An army. "Keep moving," I ordered. "We're not here to fight. We're here to get Elior." But they weren't going to let us pass unchallenged. The first wave hit us 100 yards from the prison. These weren't lesser demons. These were soldiers of the pit, warriors who'd fought in the first rebellion, who'd seen the face of God and chosen to spit at it. They came with weapons forged from fallen grace, with claws that could rend souls, with voices that spoke madness directly into the mind. My hunters met them with blessed steel and desperate faith. Thomas died first. A demon that looked like an angel crossed with a spider took his head off with one clean strike. He didn't scream, didn't have time. He just fell, and we kept moving because stopping meant dying, and his death couldn't mean nothing. Rebecca and James held the left flank, buying time with their lives. I heard her scream a prayer, heard him laugh, actually laugh, as he detonated a blessed grenade in the middle of a demon cluster, taking himself with it. Dakota made it to within 50 feet of the prison before something with too many arms pulled her down. I saw her stab upward, saw golden light bloom from the wound she opened, and then she was gone beneath a tide of darkness. Victoria fought like fury incarnate, her prosthetic arm modified now with blessed silver spikes, each punch drawing screams from demons unused to pain. She carved us a path, but it cost her. I saw her take a claw through the stomach, saw her keep fighting, even as her intestines tried to slip free. "Go!" she screamed at me. "Finish it!" I ran. Father Dominic was beside me, wheezing but determined, his old shotgun roaring with blessed rounds. We hit the prison wall together, and it felt like touching electricity and ice and grief all mixed together. The vial in my pocket shattered from the resonance, and Elior's essence poured out, soaking into my hand, searing through my skin. The knowledge came with the blood, the ritual, the words, the price. It requires life, I realized, speaking the words as I understood them. The prison was built from Elior's life. To unmake it needs equivalent payment. Father Dominic looked at me, smiled. Then I'm glad I came. He pressed his shotgun into my hands. "Finish your work, Nathaniel. I'll buy you time." "Father, I'm 73 years old, son. I've buried more people than I can count. But you—" He touched my chest, over my heart. "You still have work to do." so let me do mine." He turned and walked back toward the fighting. I heard him singing, Dies Irae, the hymn of judgment, as he fired into the demon horde. Heard his voice cut off suddenly and knew he was gone. I pressed my scarred hand against the prison wall, spoke the words that had come with Elior's blood, felt power surge through me, pulling, demanding. The ritual wanted life, wanted sacrifice. I gave it freely, felt my own essence begin to drain, to feed into the working. The wall started to crack. Inside, Asmodriel roared, "Fool! You'll destroy us both!" "Good," I gasped. My vision was tunneling, my strength fading, but the crack spread, golden light bleeding through, and I could feel Elior in there, could feel his consciousness stirring, waking from its long dream. "Elior, can you hear me?" For a moment, nothing. Then, "Professor?" His voice, faint, confused, but unmistakably him. I laughed, tasting blood. "Yeah, kid, it's me. We're getting you out. You shouldn't be here. The generals are currently learning that hunters die hard." Another crack. The prison was coming apart, not explosively but surgically, the pieces of Elior's essence reforming, coalescing. I could see him now, taking shape inside the light, his form rebuilding from memory and will, and the sheer stubborn refusal to stay dead. "The price," Elior said, his voice growing stronger. "I can feel what you're doing. You're killing yourself to free me." "Some debts you pay," I quoted Thomas's words, "no matter what." No. Suddenly he was there, pressing against the other side of the thinning wall. I could see his face clearly now, older, scarred by his time as a prison, but alive. "Not like this. I won't buy my freedom with your life. Not your choice to make." "Actually," Elior said, and he smiled that sad young smile I remembered. "It is." He placed his hand over mine. Power flowed backward, the ritual reversing. My life force stopped draining. Instead, Elior's essence surged outward, not fleeing the prison but claiming it, making it part of himself rather than his cage. The prison wasn't breaking. It was transforming. Light exploded outward. I was thrown back, landing hard enough to crack ribs I'd just healed from the last fight. Through blurred vision, I watched the prison collapse inward, folding like origami, until all that remained was a single figure standing in empty space. Elior, fully manifested, fully free, but different. His body was wrapped in armor that looked grown rather than forged, made from the same light and scar tissue as the prison had been. His wings, and he had wings now, 4 of them, spreading wide, were mixed. 2 looked angelic, pure white. 2 looked almost demonic, black as void, and his eyes blazed with power that made my bones vibrate. He looked at me. I absorbed the prison, made it part of myself. Asmodriel is still sealed, but now he's sealed in me. I'm his cage, his warden, his eternal enemy. Around us, the demon army faltered. They could feel it too, the shift in power. One of their generals was now bound inside a being that was part angel, part human, part prison. "Run," Elior said softly. The demons ran. Elior turned to me and his expression softened. "You were supposed to let me stay dead. You were supposed to not get yourself trapped in the first place," I replied. "Guess we're both disappointments." He laughed, actually laughed. Then he looked past me, at the battlefield, at the bodies. 27 hunters had entered this place. 5 still stood, bloodied and broken but alive. Victoria among them, holding her guts in with one hand and giving me a thumbs up with the other. "They came for me," Elior said wonderingly, "knowing they'd die." "You came for us first," I said. 5 years ago. This was just returning the favor. He knelt beside me, touched my forehead like Shamael had done. Healing warmth flooded through me, knitting bone, sealing wounds. "I can't stay," he said quietly. with Asmodriel inside me. I'm too dangerous. If he ever breaks free, if I lose control even for a moment. I know, I said, because I did. But you're free. You get to choose now. That's worth the price. Elior helped me to my feet, helped gather the survivors, used his new power to open a clean pathway back to Earth, not the ragged tear I'd managed. As we stepped through, he caught my arm. Professor, thank you for everything. For not turning me away, for coming back, for, his voice caught, for making me believe I was worth saving. You saved yourself, I said. I just held the door open. We emerged into the chapel at dawn. The candles had burned down to nubs. The new students who'd stayed behind rushed forward, crying and shouting with relief and grief. They helped the survivors to the infirmary, asked about the others, wept when they learned. Elior stood apart, watching, already becoming other, already separating himself from humanity's warmth. You'll come back sometimes, I said. It wasn't a question. When I can, he promised. When it's safe. But there are others out there. Other Nephilim hiding, scared, alone. I need to find them, teach them, build something that can stand against the pit without sacrificing everything. Build an army, I said. Build a family. He spread his wings, and they caught the dawn light beautifully. One that chooses to fight rather than being born into war. He left through the window, rising into the morning sky. I watched until he was just a speck of light against the blue, then gone entirely. Father Dominic was dead. Thomas, James, Rebecca, Dakota, and 22 others, more names for the memorial wall. More ghosts to carry. But 5 survived. 5 came home. And somewhere between realms, a Nephilim walked free, carrying a demon general as his eternal burden and his eternal purpose. That was 15 years ago. I'm old now. 56 years of hunting demons leaves marks that don't heal. My scarred hand aches in cold weather. My hearing never fully recovered. I walk with a limp from the ribs that healed crooked. But I still teach, still train new hunters. And sometimes, during evening prayers, when the wind is right and the candles burn in colors they shouldn't, I feel him. Elior. Out there, fighting his war, finding his family. Living the life we bought with blood and faith and the stubborn human insistence that no one, not even a half-angel, deserves to die alone. The light still lives. And as long as it does, as long as one Nephilim walks free between worlds, the darkness will never completely win. That's not victory. Not the kind they write about in books. But it's enough. It has to be enough.